The wrestling world was shaken in late August 2025 when Raja Jackson, son of MMA legend Quinton "Rampage" Jackson, was involved in one of the most disturbing incidents ever captured during a live event. What was supposed to be a routine segment at the KnokX Pro Wrestling Academy in Sun Valley, Los Angeles, Raja, 25 years old and known more for his lineage than for his own career, stormed into the ring and brutally attacked wrestler Stuart "Syko Stu" Smith. The assault went far beyond the realm of performance. After lifting and slamming Smith to the mat, Raja delivered more than 20 vicious, unscripted punches directly to his head, even as Smith appeared limp and defenseless. Fellow wrestlers and staff rushed in to stop the onslaught, but not before another was struck trying to intervene. Smith was left hospitalized with broken bones and severe injuries, sparking widespread outrage. The incident quickly went viral, drawing condemnation from fans, fighters, and industry veterans alike, and igniting heated debates across MMA, boxing, and pro wrestling communities about safety, accountability, and justice. Saturday, August 23, 2025. A small but loud crowd files into the KnokX Pro Wrestling Academy in Sun Valley, Los Angeles, expecting a typical indie show. Big characters, safe stunts, and a handshake unseen between performers who protect each other while selling the illusion of danger. The event is live-streamed on Kick, and clips will soon ricochet across the internet. But in the moment, it's just another SoCal wrestling night until it isn't. Mid-match, Raja Jackson, the 25-year-old son of former UFC champion Quinton "Rampage" Jackson, slides into the ring. The footage shows him lifting Stuart "Syko Stu" Smith and slamming him hard to the canvas. In wrestling, that's normal. What follows is not. Raja mounts Smith and rains down punches. Not pulled, staged shots, but real, violent blows. ESPN and the LA Times tally 20-plus strikes, with the Times specifying 23 punches thrown as the crowd's roar turns into alarm. Two wrestlers rush in, then more. They pry Raja off. He pushes free, tries to get back to Smith, and is ultimately pinned in a corner. The ring has become a crime scene. LAPD confirms officers were dispatched around 9 p.m., responding to a call initially described as an attempted murder. When police arrive, the suspect is gone. The victim is transported to a hospital. By Monday, August 25, police say they've completed a felony battery report and assigned detectives. No arrests are announced at that time. Meanwhile, the Academy posts a public statement. What should have been a planned and agreed-upon spot became a selfish, irresponsible act of violence. Across social media, the clip goes viral. Millions see a staged show mutate into a real beating. That's the corrected start. August 23, 2025, KnokX Pro, Sun Valley. A match that should have told a safe story instead told a terrifying truth about what happens when performance loses its guardrails, and the law steps in. The timeline begins before the ring. Video from earlier that day shows a parking lot confrontation. Smith appears to hit Raja with a drink can near the head as phones record. In the same rolling footage, wrestlers discuss receipts, the insider term for giving payback that looks real but stays within the boundaries of a work. One voice says, "We're always working. We'll set it up where I'll have him come out during your match so we could seal the whole thing." Another adds, "When you run out, you give him his receipts. You remember what a receipt is? Those words will matter later when blame and intent are parsed." Inside the building, during Smith's match, the receipt turns into real ground and pound. KnokX Pro's published statement insists the violent sequence was not scripted. The Academy apologizes to fans and calls the act reprehensible. ESPN echoes that framing. A planned element went off the normal script into a beating of an apparently unconscious performer. At the same time, circulating videos and witness accounts suggest miscommunication and egging on language earlier in the night that could muddy intent while never excusing the outcome. The facts that are crystal clear. Smith went limp, punches kept falling, and ringside staff had to physically end the attack. Even within wrestling's blurry border between kayfabe and reality, consent has limits. Legal experts interviewed by the LA Times stress that no one is going to consent to broken bones and broken teeth. Sports can create consent to inherent risks. They don't create a shield for excessive one-sided violence once a performer is incapacitated. That's why LAPD logged it as a potential felony from the jump, and why prosecutors, if charges come, will focus on force, duration, and the victim's condition. The wrestling Mainstream discourse can argue work versus shoot forever. The criminal code won't. To complete the picture, adjacent figures have begun defending their role. AJ Mana, seen near the ring, says he followed promoter directions and didn't incite violence beyond what he was told to facilitate. Broader criticism targets the event's safety protocols and booking decisions. Why an inexperienced outside fighter was put into a live angle without rigorous control. Those claims continue to develop under public scrutiny and, potentially, police interviews. Behind the headlines is Stuart "Syko Stu" Smith, an indie wrestler and U.S. military veteran known for grinding on small cards where passion often pays more than the purse. After the ring assault, he's rushed to a Los Angeles hospital. Early reports list him as stable, then family and fellow wrestlers share incremental good news. He's awake, alert, talking, and remembers parts of the day. Alongside those updates come the injuries. Several broken facial bones and multiple teeth lost. Exactly the kind of damage legal experts cite when they say consent does not stretch that far. The community rallies fast. A GoFundMe spikes past notable thresholds as fans, wrestlers, and strangers donate toward medical bills and recovery. Major outlets amplify the fundraiser. Interview clips and hospital bed updates circulate, including TMZ Sports segments and write-ups noting that Smith is conscious and communicating. It's the human heartbeat inside the viral clip, a working performer who trusted the system, now navigating surgeries, pain management, and the uncertainty of getting back to any kind of ring, wrestling, work, or normal life. Meanwhile, the public statements pile up. Rampage Jackson live streams an apology of sorts. He says he doesn't condone his son's actions, wasn't present, believes a work went wrong, notes Raja had a recent concussion and no business doing physical contact, and says he hopes to apologize to Smith personally. He also condemns the racist backlash that followed, while making clear he'll let justice take its course. For Smith's supporters, the focus remains simpler: heal the man who got hurt and seek accountability for what happened under those lights. By week's end, the picture is sober and specific. August 23, 2025. Sun Valley, 23 punches captured on viral video. Felony battery report filed. Victim conscious with serious facial injuries, and a wrestling academy publicly labeling the act reprehensible. However the legal path unfolds, the first duty is to the person in the bed, and the first lesson for promoters is that process and safety aren't optional when your art form simulates violence. By the Monday following the incident, the Los Angeles Police Department had already confirmed a felony battery report was filed. The call came in around 9 p.m. on August 23, flagged as an attempted murder before being updated to a battery investigation. According to LAPD spokesperson Officer Rosario Cervantes, patrol officers responded to a report of a battery suspect assaulting another man at a wrestling event in Sun Valley. When they arrived, Raja Jackson had already left the scene. The victim, Stuart "Syko Stu" Smith, was transported to a local hospital with serious facial injuries. Detectives were assigned to the case almost immediately. The video evidence is central. Unlike so many alleged assaults that rely on partial testimony, this event was live-streamed and clipped within minutes. Multiple angles circulated, Raja mounting Smith, delivering more than 20 unanswered punches. Other wrestlers rushing in. Legal analysts, quoted by the Los Angeles Times, noted how strong the video would be in any prosecution. Consent to a wrestling match doesn't mean consent to be battered once you're unconscious. They stressed that no assumption of risk covers being struck while limp on the mat. What makes this case unusual is the performance context. Wrestling is built on works, choreographed violence, where both performers know the outcome. Raja's defenders have argued that miscommunication or inexperience blurred the lines. But prosecutors look at intent and outcome, not kayfabe. Did Jackson knowingly deliver real punches? Did he continue after Smith stopped defending? Did his actions cause substantial injury? The video suggests yes across the board. Complicating matters is the backstage footage that leaked. It shows Smith earlier hitting Raja with a drink can outside, then voices explaining receipts and encouraging Raja to get his payback in the ring. That detail could matter. If defense attorneys argue Raja thought he was following promoter instructions, believing some level of stiffness was sanctioned, the case becomes more complicated. Still, prosecutors will emphasize the disproportionate force and duration of the strikes. Payback in wrestling might mean one snug slap or stiff clothesline. It doesn't mean 20-plus headshot. At the time of this script, no arrest had been announced, but felony battery charges remained on the table. In California, felony battery can carry up to 4 years in prison if serious bodily harm is proven. Add to that potential civil suits from Smith and his family to cover medical bills and damages, and Raja's legal exposure is enormous. Even if prosecutors pursue a plea or diversion program, the viral visibility of the incident means the DA's office will feel public pressure to deliver accountability. The LAPD's wording, "suspect assaulted another male," is blunt. In the public eye, it already looks open and shut, a violent act on video. But law operates on standards of proof, not outrage, which means this case will hinge not just on the footage, but on context, medical records, and testimony from Smith, the promoter, and every person ringside that night. And while the justice system moved at its deliberate pace, the fight community wasn't waiting. By the time police finished their first reports, MMA and wrestling voices around the world were weighing in. The hospital lights were still bright on Stuart Smith's battered face when the first wave of public statements rolled in. The most anticipated came from his father, Quentin "Rampage" Jackson. On Instagram Live, Rampage spoke in a voice heavy with regret. "I don't condone what happened. I wasn't there. Raja had a concussion recently. He had no business doing physical contact. It should have been a work that went wrong." He apologized to Smith, condemned the racist vitriol directed at his son online, and said he wanted to personally apologize to Smith and his family. Rampage's tone was conflicted, protective of his son, yet openly critical of what happened. The KnokX Pro Wrestling Academy also released a strong statement. They said the spot had been planned and agreed upon, but Raja had turned it into a selfish, irresponsible act of violence. They assured fans the academy would review safety protocols and expressed solidarity with Smith and his recovery. To them, it was essential to draw a line. Wrestling is dangerous enough when done properly. When trust breaks, the art collapses into assault. Other fighters weighed in. Dylan Dennis, a polarizing figure in MMA, tweeted that what Raja did was disgraceful, calling it a betrayal of the wrestling code. You protect your opponent even when you hate him. That's the deal. Former wrestlers, too, chimed in. Some said promoters were irresponsible for booking an inexperienced outsider into a live angle without strict oversight. Others blamed Raja's lack of discipline. Promoter AJ Mana, who was seen near the ring, defended himself by saying he simply followed directions given to him and didn't incite Raja to go beyond what was planned. Fans split into camps. Some blamed the culture of stiffness in wrestling, where performers sometimes hit harder than usual for realism. They argued Raja may have misunderstood what was expected. Others dismissed that argument, pointing to the video. Smith's body went limp, yet punches kept falling. That wasn't stiffness, they said. It was a beating. Meanwhile, Smith's peers in the independent wrestling scene rallied around him. They circulated links to his GoFundMe, shared personal stories about his generosity, and emphasized the human cost of chasing passion in low-budget promotions. In that community, wrestlers often don't have health insurance. Injuries can derail livelihoods. Smith's hospital bed wasn't just a tragedy. It was a spotlight on how vulnerable indie wrestlers are. Yet amid the sympathy and condemnation, one voice rose that didn't fit neatly into either camp. Sean Strickland, never shy of controversy, saw the viral clip, heard the calls for prison, and said something almost nobody else did. Maybe prison wasn't the answer. If you know Sean Strickland, you know he doesn't bite his tongue. The former UFC middleweight champion has built a reputation for unfiltered opinions, sometimes funny, often offensive, always unvarnished. But when the Raja Jackson video went viral and fans demanded jail time, Strickland took a different tack. On social media, he argued that prison should always be a last resort. Strickland drew on his own past. As a teenager, he spent time tangled in the criminal justice system, arrests, probation, brushes with courts. He has spoken openly about his troubled youth, about running with the wrong crowd, and about how close he came to being swallowed by the system. In his posts, he explained that incarceration often makes people worse, not better. If I went to prison when I was younger, I'd have come out a gangbanger. I'd be worse. Instead, I had chances to get my life back. To him, Raja's case should be met with rehabilitation, not warehousing. He wasn't defending the act itself. Strickland made clear that the assault was wrong, but he urged fans to see beyond the viral outrage. In his words, locking Raja in a cell would just turn him into a worse person. He pointed to programs that helped him redirect his life toward fighting, training, and eventually the UFC title. He argued for alternatives: mandatory counseling, community service, supervised probation, anything that fixes behavior without stamping someone permanently with the scars of prison. Of course, the backlash came quickly. Critics said Strickland was tone-deaf. How could he minimize a brutal attack that left a man hospitalized with broken bones? Some pointed to Strickland's own history of controversial comments, racial, political, inflammatory, and argued he had had no credibility lecturing anyone about morality. Others countered that lived experience matters, and Strickland knew firsthand what prison can do to young men. His stance sharpened the debate. Was Raja's attack a crime deserving punishment, or a mistake deserving rehabilitation? Should prison be the default answer for violence in performance contexts, or does the uniqueness of pro wrestling complicate the calculus? In a sport where fighters often pride themselves on toughness and redemption arcs, Strickland's words found support among some who believe the system punishes without reforming. Whether you agreed or not, Strickland forced a hard question into the conversation. Is justice about retribution or about correction? And in doing so, he reframed the narrative around Raja Jackson from "how long should he serve?" to "what's the smartest way to prevent this from happening again?" By the time the dust settled from the initial hospital reports, the argument wasn't just about what Raja Jackson did. It was about what should happen to him next. The video had already handed prosecutors a strong case for felony battery. The injuries to Stuart, Syko Stu, Smith were undeniable. The outrage online was deafening. For many, the answer seemed simple. Charge him, convict him, and put him behind bars. Anything less, they argued, would be an insult to the victim and a dangerous precedent for violent behavior in pro wrestling. But Sean Strickland's comments cracked that narrative wide open. His insistence that prison should always be a last resort forced people to examine the situation from another angle. On one side stood the argument for punishment. The rule of law requires accountability, and an assault in front of hundreds of witnesses can't be brushed aside. On the other stood the case for rehabilitation, that Raja was a young man who made a catastrophic mistake, not an irredeemable criminal, and that incarceration might only harden him further. Supporters of punishment pointed to the severity of the act. Smith wasn't just roughed up in a bar fight. He was pummeled while unconscious in a workplace environment, after entering the ring under the understanding of scripted performance. Legal analysts noted that consent in combat sports has limits. Once Smith went limp, every additional punch crossed into assault territory. Victims' advocates argued that jail time serves as both justice for Smith and a deterrent for anyone else tempted to blur the line between performance and violence. If Raja avoided prison, they warned, what message would that send? On the other side, those who echoed Strickland's viewpoint emphasized the context and opportunity for change. Raja was young, with no known history of violent crime outside this incident. His father, Rampage, insisted Raja had been recovering from a concussion and shouldn't have been cleared to perform at all. Others pointed to the backstage video where promoters encouraged Raja to give a receipt, suggesting mismanagement played a role. Rehabilitation advocates argued that if the goal of justice is preventing future harm, then programs like anger management, mandatory counseling, restorative justice with the victim, and monitored probation could be more effective than throwing him into a prison system that often breeds more violence. Strickland's personal testimony carried weight too. His point was not abstract. He lived the risk of what prison could have done to him. He argued that people like him, and now Raja, needed correction and structure, not cages. His critics countered that his success story was an exception, not the rule. Still, the tension between justice as retribution and justice as correction had become the central storyline. And hanging over the debate was Smith himself, the man in the hospital bed. Would he support a restorative approach? Would his family demand jail time? The answer would help shape not just Raja's fate, but how the broader community interpreted this clash between punishment and rehabilitation. As the legal system weighed Raja's individual accountability, another layer of scrutiny grew louder: the accountability of the event itself. The KnokX Pro Wrestling Academy was quick to distance itself, calling Raja's actions reprehensible and insisting the spot had been planned safely. But the leaked backstage video complicated that defense. In the clip, voices can be heard telling Raja to remember what a receipt is, and that he'd get his chance during Smith's match. If the environment encouraged payback, then KnokX couldn't pretend Raja had acted in a total vacuum. Promoter responsibility became a talking point across wrestling forums and MMA podcasts alike. Wrestling, unlike MMA, doesn't have a state-sanctioned commission regulating every move. It operates in a gray space, relying on the professionalism of promoters and wrestlers to keep each other safe. When that chain of trust fails, skills, the consequences can be catastrophic. The Raja incident exposed how thin those guardrails really are in some indie shows. Why was an inexperienced outsider, still dealing with a concussion according to his father, allowed in a live ring without oversight? Why wasn't there a producer or referee trained to immediately stop the bout once the strikes turned real? Then there was Rampage Jackson's response. In his live stream, he made clear he believed Raja shouldn't have been in the ring at all. He had no business doing contact. Rampage condemned the act, but also blamed the situation, hinting at negligence from the promotion. His comments underscored the idea that accountability is layered. Raja was responsible for throwing punches, yes, but others were responsible for putting him in a position where he could. The backlash wasn't limited to KnokX. Independent wrestling as a whole took a reputational hit. Fans who had never attended an indie show now viewed them as dangerous, unregulated spaces where anything could happen. Wrestlers, meanwhile, defended the craft, emphasizing that the golden rule of the business is protecting your opponent. To them, Raja's actions weren't just a crime against Smith, they were a betrayal of the brotherhood of wrestling. Yet, critics argued, betrayals like this don't happen in a vacuum. The culture of stiffness, where wrestlers occasionally hit harder to sell realism, can create an environment where outsiders misunderstand the line. If Raja thought he was giving Smith a receipt, as suggested by the leaked video, then this wasn't just about one man, it was about systemic miscommunication and failure. In the end, accountability had to be shared. Raja for his choices, KnokX for its safety protocols, and perhaps the wrestling industry at large for failing to educate and protect performers in situations where performance can slip into violence. As weeks passed, the story evolved into three interwoven threads: the legal aftermath, the medical recovery, and the cultural reckoning. Legally, Raja's case moved at the pace of most felony investigations. Detectives gathered statements, collected footage, and prepared to present findings to the district attorney. The decision loomed: pursue felony battery charges, push for a plea deal, or consider diversion programs that matched Strickland's rehabilitation argument. California law allows for both harsh sentences and restorative approaches, depending on circumstances. Raja's lack of prior violent convictions could weigh in his favor. On the other hand, the public nature of the assault, caught on viral video, could pressure prosecutors to make an example. Medically, Smith's recovery became a rallying point. Reports confirmed he was awake and talking, but the damage was real: broken facial bones, lost teeth, ongoing treatment. Fundraisers continued to climb, supported by wrestling fans and MMA fighters alike. The community's focus was not just on covering bills, but on making sure Smith knew he wasn't forgotten. In a sport where performers often risk everything for little financial return, that solidarity mattered. Culturally, the incident sparked bigger questions about where performance ends and crime begins. Wrestling has long thrived on the blurring of lines, but the Raja incident showed what happens when those lines collapse. Promoters across the indie circuit began talking about new safety measures: clearer pre-match communication, stricter vetting of outside performers, and on-site staff empowered to stop matches if things go sideways. And then there was Strickland's contribution. By insisting that prison isn't always the answer, he added nuance to a conversation that might otherwise have been one-dimensional. Whether people agreed or not, his voice forced fans and fighters to consider rehabilitation alongside punishment, even in a case as shocking as this. Ultimately, the legacy of this incident will depend on three outcomes. First, whether Raja faces prison, probation, or rehabilitation. Second, whether Smith can fully recover and perhaps return to the ring. And third, whether the wrestling world learns from this moment and strengthens the guardrails between art and harm. Because, in the end, this wasn't just a viral clip of chaos. It was a real man hurt in a space that was supposed to protect him. A young fighter whose actions could define his future, and a debate about justice itself, punishment, or rehabilitation that reaches far beyond the ropes of a Sun Valley ring.